Thank you, Michael. Good evening. It is so good to be with you here. I'm about to take a full deep breath, and I want to take a deep breath with all of you. I just want to take all of you in. So let's just take a deep breath in and exhale out. So my topic this evening is called Rising Strong, Graces in the Storm. And I've been thinking a lot about the idea of what it means to allow grace to come into our experience when we are in times of challenge and stormy, rocky moments. Because so often, when we're in the midst of the storm, we don't really see the light, right? And so I came from Oakland about a few days ago on Friday. I drove here for about 10 hours, and as I was coming into town, I started to feel really horrible, and I started to get sick. So on Saturday, here I am in bed, knowing that I have to speak on Sunday morning at 2 services, and I feel awful. And so I'm thinking, great, my topic is graces in the storm, and how am I going to do this? So, miraculously, I got through the service, and it was a beautiful talk. And what I really want to touch on tonight is how is it that we rely on grace? What is it that we must cultivate within us that allows us to move through difficult experiences? And I recall this past week and a half of the situation in Orlando and how heavy that has been for so many people on so many levels. And as I was contemplating the idea of grace, I thought to myself of the song Amazing Grace. And when I was 16 years old, I sat by the bedside of my grandmother who was dying. And she used to go to the African American churches in the South and listen to their spirituals and feel the soulful music. And it was her favorite song. And so I sang this to her on her deathbed, and I decided I wanted to do some history about this song, Amazing Grace. I know we've all heard it. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I once was lost, but now am found. 'Twas blind, but now I see. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. So I don't know if you know this, but the history of Amazing Grace is about the man who wrote it. His name is John Newton, and he was born in 1725 in London. He was the son of a seaman, and he sailed the Mediterranean at 11 years old. When he became much older, he became a man of war, and he found the conditions on the ships to be so intolerable that he deserted, but he was soon recaptured and publicly flogged and demoted as a common seaman. And then many years later, he was exchanged to work as a slave with the slave ship owner in Sierra Leone, and he became a servant. He was badly abused. He had no religious background, and one night he recalls being out on sea, and he realized that the ship was about to go under. And he exclaimed out into the heavens, "Lord, have mercy upon us." And they all survived. And it was in that moment that his entire perception of life completely shifted. And he says that he became a believer and that grace had saved his life. And so how do we fully rely on the grace of God in our lives to carry us during difficult and challenging times? Grace has been defined as the outward expression of the inward harmony of the soul. So what is grace? Well, Ernest Holmes says that grace is love in action. It is the undeniable full acceptance of the law of good. It is the givingness of spirit to its creation, and it is not a special law, but a specialized one. Grace is, but we need to recognize it. It is not something good imposed upon us, but it is the logical result of the correct acceptance of life and the correct relationship with spirit. We are saved by grace to the extent that we believe in accept and see and embody the law of goodness. So, as an organization with Centers for Spiritual Living, we have been going through what we believe a world that works for all people, and every month there's a theme. And the theme for this month has been to be free from all discord. We believe that we are to be emancipated from discord of all nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all. So I've been thinking about this, how do we get through tumultuous times? Because the world would tell us that we are separate. The conditioning that we see out in the world is separation, it is fear, it is lack. You turn on the TV and it is so crazy. And so when we start to focus on the joy and the love and the unity, what we understand is that everything unlike that must surface. Everything unlike the unity and the love and the joy must surface for us to heal. I look at it as parts of the shadow. It's like in the political and the media sphere right now. I choose to look at it as all of the unhealed aspects of our world, of the collective consciousness that has to surface for us to learn to integrate this and transmute it. And so what has come to me? It's come to me that we have to start looking at the we consciousness and not the them. How often do we use the word them? Us and them. And it's really about getting still. I know that Reverend Josh has used that in a spiritual practice in a talk here about stillness. It's about us getting still and cultivating a relationship with the divine of our understanding. In 1 Corinthians it says, "There, but for the grace of God I go." It's a time for pause, it's a time for silence, and in my own life, my life has been so interesting and a little bit crazy. And so I know that was part of the reason I got sick and coming here. And so it's a moment for us to remember in the world of effect when everything is going on and it's crazy, it's a time for us to just be still and to surrender and to pause and to take a breath. The writer Anne Lamott says, "I do not all understand the mystery of grace, only that it meets us where we are, but does not leave us where it found us." Back in 2012, I was living in Egypt, and I was there at one of their crazy revolution times, right after the Arab Spring. And I recall leaving my apartment often in an anxiety and a fear and always afraid that someone would be following me, or just heaviness in the air. And I remember thinking to myself, how can I be a bright light in the midst of this crazy chaos? I was seeing fires burning in the streets and troops and armed men and all kinds of just craziness every single day. And I kept asking in my prayer work that this heaviness be lifted. But what I realized in the experience is that Egypt was an incredible mirror for me. It was like the shadow unapologetically looking back at me. All the distractions that I have in this country totally fell away. And I was forced to look at the shadow stuff, the unhealed stuff within myself. And so we know that what's out picturing in the world is just a direct reflection of our consciousness. And so I knew in my experience there that having left of now, I can look back and say it was such a rich experience. It was a time of such great transformation. And I got a great career out of it, and I got a great magazine cover out of it. But I had to go through the dark stuff. And so how did grace carry me? Grace carried me because I made the decision every single day to find something beautiful. To find beauty in something, in someone, in a smile on the street, wherever I could find it. The other way that we learn to trust grace is by remembering who and whose we are. This infinite, perfect, divine expression of the One. Remembering the truth that the Father and I are one, the God, you can call it by whatever name you wish, that God and I are one, that I am connected to that life, that I can do anything because of this life. I'm co-creating the world I wish to experience. So back in, a year and a half ago, I was asked by a minister in our organization in Ukraine if I would go back to Ukraine to lead a peace conference for her. Now, I've been to Ukraine 6 times and over the last 11 years, and she said, you know, I need you to fill in for me for this peace conference because I have an emergency, I can't be there. I said, well, Barbara, you know that's like in 5 days, right? And she goes, well, yeah, but you can do it, you know the culture, you know the people, it'll be great, you know, you'll have a great time. And I said, well, you do know there's a revolution going on there, right? She's like, yeah, but you know, it's all gonna happen, it's all divine. And I have to tell you, I was terrified to go. But you know how there's this intuitive thing that taps you on the shoulder that's like, yeah, you need to go do that. So I said yes, and I had no idea how that was going to unfold or happen. And I also didn't know what to expect on the ground when I got there. So here I am, I've got my bags packed 5 days later, I'm at the gate at SFO, and the gate checker has just sent this lovely older couple off to Hawaii. And here I am standing there with my passport and my boarding pass that says I'm flying into Kyiv, Ukraine. And so he looks at the boarding pass and he looks at me and he says, are you sure you want to go there? And I thought, oh my God, yes, I'm going, it's gonna happen. So here I am on the plane, I get to Switzerland, and if you've done any world travel, you know that at this point, you're a little delirious. And so I get on the plane from Switzerland to Ukraine, and it is half empty. There is nobody going to Ukraine. So I went into panic, and I started making up all kinds of stories about what was going to happen. And then I started to say a mantra that I'm sure many of you have heard. It's there is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. And I repeated this over and over again, and I arrived at the airport and was greeted by my beautiful friends. And they took me off into the woods where this conference was, and in one of the evenings we did this incredible nurturing experience that all of our teenagers, if you've ever been to teen camp, it's called AB, and it's this amazing nurturing process of giving and receiving love. And so here we are with all these candles lit, and we're doing this process, and all of a sudden out of the corner of my eye, I see some people walking towards us. And I think, oh no, what are we gonna do? This is a public event, and you know, I don't know who these people are, and they might think we're kind of crazy. Sure enough, the little ones came into the circle, and without any instruction from me, they closed their eyes and put their hands down to receive. And it was so profound and so beautiful that after this experience, these people came up to me, and I found out that they were Ukrainian refugees from eastern Ukraine who had been displaced. And so I had the opportunity to hear their stories. And on the way home, I thought, okay, was I really divinely meant to be there? You know, there are times in life when we don't always know what's around the corner, we don't know what's next, we don't even know how to get out of the situation that we're in. But there was something within me, there's just this intuitive knowing, there was something that within me that knew I had to be there. And grace carried itself through that experience, and now I come home and think, oh my gosh, of course I was meant to be there. Ernest Hemingway says that courage is grace under pressure. Courage is grace under pressure. The other way that we allow grace into our lives during hard times is by immersing ourselves in radical self-care. Now, I know you ministerial students know what I'm talking about. It's really about putting ourselves first, and how many of us do that? We're always looking to please everyone else, or we're always looking outside of ourselves for something, right? And so it's about immersing ourselves in complete self-care and loving ourselves. We understand that the job or the beloved or anything that we're seeking outside of ourselves cannot come unless we have a complete love of self. And the other way that we allow grace into our lives is by looking at these experiences as opportunities. I'm sure many of you have heard some people say, rather than being in their woes, they say, oh, well, it's an opportunity to grow. And truly it is. I look at my experience back in Egypt, and I look at those dark times as a gift because it allowed me to see parts of myself I otherwise would not have seen. I would not have known. Margaret Mead says, I'm sure you've heard this as well, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So it's about getting still. And we will do that after I finish this talk. We will get still. We will do a spiritual practice of really listening. I will ask specific questions that will guide you into a deeper listening. I believe that in my own spiritual practice, I'm often asked, what qualities do I need to cultivate to move through whatever it is I'm dealing with? It could be a deeper trust. It could be a deeper patience of life. It could be my own surrender of saying, you know what, I give it over. I'm done trying to control and manipulate circumstances and outcomes. So to continue the story about John Newton, 34 years after the slave trade, he finally broke his silence about his involvement with the ships, and he apologized, reflecting on his humiliation for what he was involved in. And he later became an ally to a man named William Wilberforce, who was also an abolitionist. And he lived to see the Slave Trade Act of 1807 to abolish the African slave trade. You know, I look at this story as a story of how we can transform our bias and our judgment and our prejudice, which is so needed in the world right now. I get the question often about what's going on in the world, well, how do you deal with it? And I say, I just have to pray more. It's not just prayer alone, however. It starts from within ourselves, and it's about standing for something. So, you know, our LGBTQ community has been deeply affected by what happened last week. And so I think it's really important as a community such as this, as the inclusive community that we are, to acknowledge them, to stand, to say and to know that we stand with you, that we love you, that we mourn and grieve with you, that we see you. And so we remember to be still, and we remember to come back to the Father and I are one, God and I are one. There's nothing outside of myself. I am connected to something greater. And we immerse ourselves in self-care, in radical self-care of caring for ourselves, of doing what brings us joy, and looking for the opportunities and the gifts in the darkness, looking for what is it that I'm being asked to cultivate right now in this experience. So there was a gathering last week with our Jewish community. I believe it was in Austin, Texas, but I'm not totally sure. And it was an interfaith gathering where the LGBT community came together with multiple religions, and this poem came out of it. And I think it's so profound, and it's going to take us right into our spiritual practice. So I will read this poem. I will go into prayer, and then I will take us just into meditation. It says, teach us to listen to the silence posed by unanswerable questions, to the silence imposed by the rupture of safety, and to that most frightening silence when we can no longer find you anywhere. Help us to remember when the memory is too distant, and when the memory is too fresh, and when the memory is too painful, and when the memory is too dull, when the memory is too horrible, and when the memory is too mundane, and when we cannot remember for us. Inspire us to act with extraordinary courage in ordinary times, with ordinary goodness in extraordinary crisis, and with unbounded imagination that dares to risk the possibility of hope. Teach us, help us, and inspire us to listen, to remember, and to act, and never to quit. Amen. And so it is. And so let us just take a deep breath now. Just coming back to the awareness that there is really only one thing happening, and that is the activity of love, of God, of infinite intelligence that is the very life that I live. It is the life of every person in this room. I am breathing. It is the divine essence. It is love itself. It is the wisdom, the grace, the ease, the power, the presence. It is this love that so loved itself and its expression that it came to be as me. And so I know now in this very moment that we are rooted in something so divine, so great, that there is something so magnificent about our lives that we have access to. And so whatever is in our experience here and now of worry or doubt or fear or lack or separation, we allow it to fall away, and I know the truth for our lives, which is healing, which is love, which is wholeness, which is perfection, which is divine right action and clarity in every moment and in every way. And so I know this truth for each and every one of us, that we remember the truth of who and whose we are. The divine expression of love. Remembering that our presence matters. That who we are matters. That what we have to contribute absolutely matters. That we are empowered and healed and nurtured and guided by this infinite intelligence that knows so much more than we could ever. It lives as our very lives. And so I affirm this and give thanks for this prayer. And I allow us to just move into a stillness now. If your eyes are not closed, you can close them now. Taking a moment to breathe. Allowing yourself to feel your heartbeat. Bringing your attention to your heart. Imagining a light within the heart that expands all throughout your entire body. It radiates from the crown of your head through your feet into the floor. So I will ask a question and just listen to whatever comes. What quality am I being asked to cultivate within myself to help me break through my fears? What is the quality that I am being asked to cultivate within myself to break through my fears? And just listen. What practice am I being asked to cultivate in my life to bring me closer to myself and to the divine? What practice am I being asked to cultivate in my life to bring me closer to myself and to God? And we listen. And what affirmation is mine to use to help me transform my doubts and fears into faith and trust? What affirmation is mine to use to help me transform my doubts and fears into faith and trust? And we listen. And so we give thanks now for all the information that has come through. For I know that we are abundantly and deeply blessed by life itself. And so I let it be. And can you all affirm with me, and so it is. Ashe. Amen.